just welcome everyone. My name is Tessa Hobbs Curley, and I am a family life educator with the University of Illinois Extension. And this is our summer self-care series. This series is a collaboration between Illinois Extension and the Interdisciplinary Health Sciences Institute at the University of Illinois, and is designed to connect those across the state with researchers at the university and provide evidence-based educational programming. And this is recorded, so we're asking that you turn off your videos. And if you have any questions during the program, please type them in the chat box. If you're calling in, please hold your questions until the end of the session. Now, without any further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker for this series, and his name is Jonathan Serna. Jonathan received a Bachelor's of Science in Dietetics with a minor in Exercise Science from Iowa State University in 2018. He is currently a MS student in the Body Composition and Nutritional Neuroscience Lab, where his primary research investigates the modularity effects of the carotenoids, pigments found in plants and animal sources in people with multiple sclerosis. Today, he'll be talking to you about making your habits stick. Welcome, Jonathan.
All right, thank you, Tessa. Thank you for that introduction. Hello, everyone. Again, as Tessa said, my name is Jonathan Serna. It is really my privilege to present on the topic of habits to everyone today. This is going to be a very practical presentation that will help you to put into action everything that you've been learning about throughout this entire series, and help you to put into action everything that is to come in the upcoming presentations. So let's get started. So just a little bit of information on who I am. I was born here in the United States in Orlando, Florida, but I will always refer to Panama as my hometown because I was raised in Panama. Here to the right, we have a picture of it in case you don't exactly know where it is. It's between Costa Rica and Colombia. And as Tessa mentioned at the beginning, I got my bachelor's degree at Iowa State University in dietetics, and I minor in exercise science. I'm a second-year student in the nutritional sciences, and I study the effects of carotenoids, which are essentially plant pigments, also found in some animal derived sources, and their effects on people with multiple sclerosis. So that's just some background on myself. And first off, I want to start by giving a personal note on the topic of behavior change. This is anecdotal, and I know that I am going to be referring a lot to the literature, but I want to make a personal statement that I have engaged in one way or another with basically all the recommendations that I'm going to be talking about. I've made many of the mistakes that many people have made, but I've engaged and tried to apply many of the solutions. And this is in line with the presentation today because it's going to be very, very practical. Again, this information here is not new at all. I'm just aggregating it for you, putting it into practical application with topics that are very in vogue nowadays. And just a disclaimer, because I am not a psychologist, a therapist, or a dietitian yet, but this would be the people that you would normally talk about for behavior change and many of the topics that we're going to cover today. And although each one of the things that I will present in each slide could be a talk in and of itself, again, I will summarize it in a way that is very practical. It'll be focused on just the relevant background information, and everything from there will be very practical and applicable. Ultimately, if you are looking to make very drastic changes that will impact your health, you should consult with your physician at the end of the day. And that is just a disclaimer again to start the presentation. I just wanted to put that out there. Some learning objectives for today. These 3 main points summarize everything that we're going to be talking about. We're going to be defining habits, and we're going to recognize their potential impact. We are going to understand habit formation, and we're going to talk about the most common misconceptions around it and how they impact our perception about behavior change. And then we're going to discuss strategies sustainable strategies to incorporate to either start or stop a habit as they pertain specifically to the topics of exercise, diet, and meditation. So first, if everyone could help me out a little bit and tell me a habit that you've been able to successfully adopt. So if you could put that in the chat, I'll give you a minute or so that you can tell me, but I'm interested. Oh, wow. Okay. We're getting a lot. Okay, it's coming in. Yeah, exercise, drinking water, going to bed early, a ton of things. This is great. Getting more sleep, mindfulness, smaller portions. Yeah, all these things definitely are incredibly important for sure, but it was actually kind of a trick question because I know that we often think of big routinary habits that we want to incorporate on a daily basis, but it really starts with something as simple as like turning the light on or just being able to brush your teeth. So let's just first go into the definition of habits, because one of the trickiest things about habits is that everyone has their own definition. And the definition really does matter. They frame the way we think about concepts. They can determine how complex or easy a concept is. And they can also paint a more or less complete picture. So just reading up here, according to the Oxford Dictionary, habits are a settled or regular tendency or practice, especially one that is hard to give up, and an automatic reaction to a specific situation. But a more updated, although informal definition, one more in line with the evidence, is a recurring solution to a recurring problem. So I want to give an example here that we might not really think of frequently, that is a habit that we for sure have it by now, but it is a habit, is turn the light on. It helps to make the point about how behaviors get adopted. So if you're thinking of this simple habit of just turning the light on, you recurrently get to your house and you encounter a problem, the light is off, to which your brain has a heuristic, a shortcut, an immediate action associated not only with your motor response of looking for the switch, but even knowing where it is with a high degree of precision and knowing the exact position in which it needs to be, et cetera, et cetera. So from this outcome, your brain perceives either a reward or a punishment. So if the room needs some more brightness, you get a reward for turning the light on. But if the room is already lit, then you get what you call a punishment, or simply the lack of a reward, which might make the actual behavior in and of itself to degrade later on. But then it also gets associated with what first caused the outcome to occur. So here you see just a cue and an outcome, a reward, all just associated by the process of sheer repetition. And I want to talk a little bit about what this might mean at the bigger level, at the big impact level. And first I want to start with a negative case study. So how this impacted people negatively. And the perfect example to me was something that happened in the Vietnam War. In 1971, alarming rates of addiction were reported during the Vietnam War. And during the second period in Vietnam, actually, up to 47% of soldiers were addicted to heroin. But thinking of this specifically in terms of habits, we can think that the GIs were sitting there and then they were trying to recover from this traumatic event that happened, or simply dealing with boredom. And it happened to be the case that their coping mechanism involved engaging with a substance that temporarily caused an uplift, like an emotional uplift, and unfortunately came with a really hard come down. But in terms of habits, we can see that they started associating their new uplifted emotional state with the substance that they consumed. But not only this, but from the other side as well, they saw that their either state of boredom or of excessive arousal was either toned down or uplifted a bit more in a sense that they liked it to the substance. But unfortunately, in the cases of substance abuse, since they had such a hard calm down, they were, at the end of the day, either feeling worse, or at least they came back to baseline, which wasn't really pleasurable, which left the gap open for them to come back again to their substance, which was their coping mechanism. This is in line with what the literature has shown regarding addiction, which many times is defined as continued use despite adverse consequences. But this is also a good case study because these people came home, and although a huge problem was forecasted, 9 out of 10 GIs were not consuming and not abusing any substance at all. And it just highlights the importance of how environment cues behavior. And I wanted just everyone to put a pin on that because I'm going to come back to that later. But now I want to turn to a positive case study. And in this case, I want to turn to one of the blue zones. People might have heard about this, but there are several zones around the world which are known for having a really long longevity. And they include people from Loma Linda, California, the Seventh-day Adventists from there. There are also people in Greece, people in Costa Rica, but right now I want to talk about the Okinawans in Japan. And they are part of a system that really values physical and mental habits that help them to live a long and healthy and vibrant life. And in the case of habits, here you can see how it positively impact them. Because say they have a, again, neutral emotional state or a slightly positive emotional state, and then they just go on to engage in their daily habits, which happens to have this well-structured, this like really well-built emotional, social, financial, just complete wellness picture of how to support their habits, which leads, we know socially and psychological, to a positive emotional state, but fortunately it leads to many byproducts of engaging in these habits, which are many times, cardiovascular benefits, cognitive benefits, which we know are associated with engaging in these habits. And again, this just causes the reoccurrence because they are intrinsically pleasurable to complete because they're reoccurrence. And since we know that they are also going from either a neutral or slightly positive state to a better one at the end because of their outcome, they start just associating each one of these outcomes with their habits, including nowadays, because we have repeatedly told them that these things are positive, even their byproducts themselves are considered and framed as something positive. But they are a very interesting population to study because nowadays, one of their aspects of wellness has been taken away slightly or just modified because they become increasingly westernized. Their diet specifically has become increasingly westernized. And here we can see a direct link between one of their wellness categories being affected and one of their byproducts going away because their cardiovascular benefits and cognitive benefits have been seen to come down. Instead of being like higher longevity, lower rates of cardiovascular disease, they have come down to the national average. So this again links this, the enrollment of these habits leads to these byproducts, and upon the removal, they are also removed. And now I want to turn to habit formation in and of itself. And this is not exactly in line, so I'm just going to put it here for you so that we get a complete picture all at once. Up here is the circle that Charles Duhigg outlined in his book, The Power of Habit. It essentially states what the literature has shown repeatedly to be what sets up a routine, which involves a trigger or a cue, a routine or a behavior, and a reward of a punishment. But here I want to talk about how a routine gets made in and of itself. And a neural process that is very important for this is called chunking, which is actually the cognitive process of stringing individual events into a smooth, automatic behavioral sequence. So I wanted this to go one by one so you could think of just riding a bike. And at the beginning, how sloppy it was. You were just looking at the floor, looking at yourself, trying to gauge your balance. And you were stringing a piece piece by piece. But upon, leaving the behavior, going and sleeping on it, and then coming back to it, it occurs more smoothly. It fits with the anecdotes of what people talk about when they're starting to drive and they barely got it, they're thinking a lot about it, and then they come back to it after repeatedly engaging in it, and it occurs smoothly. But neurally, this is really interesting. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the neurophysiological underpinning of this, because it is highly related to the dopaminergic system. Here, dopamine, just so that we understand the context, it is essential for the feeling of reward, so that we can feel that completing the task in and of itself is intrinsically rewarding. It is also essential for us to learn the behavior, and it is essential for that behavior to reoccur. And neurally, this has been studied with fMRI studies, and we've seen a shift in processes used from the active thinking frontal lobes to the sensory motor and subconscious systems of the brain, which, as I mentioned before, totally fits in with the anecdotes of, just sloppily stringing it together to it then therefore becoming subconscious, smooth, just, what do they call it? Like the learned motor response or muscle memory. So all that really just shows how the neural underpinnings really do fit with the anecdotes. And now I wanted to talk a little bit about some common misconceptions of behavioral change, because they many times create more barriers than are needed in order for us to adopt the behavior. And you might have heard this. It goes like, if you do the same thing for 100 days, it will become a habit. So this really is just people trying to put a timeline to it, and people talk about 1,000 hours, 2,000 hours, and in Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell outlined the 10,000 hours, which in the literature has sometimes been talked about. But I want to propose here that there is a very simple solution to this timeline that people try to project, which is just to change the way in which we think about the way in which we want to be involved with habits. It's just, we don't normally want to just be engaged with a habit and then leave it. Although there are some things that we might want to do like that, for most practical purposes, we want to sustain a habit indefinitely. So the question really is, how can I sustain this habit indefinitely? Not how long will it be until I accomplish this habit. Again, for most habits, we want to sustain them indefinitely. So don't think of it, don't try to put a timeline that is, not reasonable just because you want to get this done as quickly as possible and then I'll get it done. Just think long term. And the second most quoted thing that I've seen out there is the talk about willpower. This quote probably encapsulates a little bit of the problem with it, which it says that most of life's actions are within our reach, but decisions take willpower. So yeah, the evidence shows that willpower is limited because it gets exhausted with many, many things. In the literature, it is often referred to as ego depletion, and factors that deplete it basically involve almost everything that we do as the day goes on, including time in and of itself, because it relates to the little stresses that occur during the day, the emotional stress, the physical stress, all of them slightly deplete our willpower and really create another barrier for us to engage in our behavior. So that's one problem, that it is limited. And the second one is that it really is a binary and linear way of thinking about accomplishing our goal, because it basically makes the ultimate goal to be either complete it or not. So instead of relying on this binary outcomes, either complete it or not, it's better to rely on a system that simply, just like the OK Now ones did and currently do, as a matter of fact, just to make these habits, this positive behavioral outcomes and physiological outcomes to occur, not only because it's the right thing to do, but because it is the default. So a few ways in which these two differ, we can see here that causality is different. Systems thinking addresses the fact that being engaged in a habit is complex instead of simple. We know that outcomes from engaging in one or another particular behavior will be multiple, not just like a single one. And the fluidity in and of itself, and here's where the binary nature of the thinking linearly or binarily is problematic, is not acknowledged. So here we either engage in it or not, whereas in a systems level thinking, we can think of our system having multiple parts that can be modified and made and changed so that the system is more resilient. So just an example of this, because again, it is really important to understand it. Thinking linearly about this, for example, with something nutritionally will be something like, here we have our willpower, we hit our willpower and our action of more fruits and vegetables that we want to engage in, and then we combine them, and then we sit down, and then now we're doing it. So it's occurring, and it might feel a little good, but now we expect, you know, increase pleasure from this or being more fulfilled, but we don't really think big picture about this. And then we have our social situation. Like say we're engaging in this new vegetarian diet for some reason, and we don't foresee that our friends really are not going to this restaurant that are really friendly for this. So we can see that the social aspect is not there, and the peer support is not there either. So it creates more friction. And then at the end of the day, we are back to baseline. We try to engage in a habit. We didn't really think big picture about this. And we are literally right where we started. But what happens if we actually engage in a bigger picture kind of thinking, systems thinking?
Jonathan, can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
We had a question from someone that says, do some people have more willpower than others?
Yeah, so interestingly, this has been looked at in the literature. Like, is there a genetic, for example, basis for this well of willpower being bigger in some people than in others? And the other question is, like, can this be affected by our environment, by behavior? Can I like flex the willpower muscle? Can I make it bigger by just basically engaging in it? And both seem to be true. Like whenever you look at studies between like twins, you see that some people engage in a habit and successfully complete or sustain the habit for longer, even in twin studies. But there are many limitations to this research. It doesn't paint a complete picture. So we don't really know. The question is, maybe yes, there are genetic differences, but what we do know for a fact is that using willpower more frequently does seem to, for some reason, increase or increase the amount of perceived willpower that one has to exert. But again, I would emphasize that it is better to have a system that leads to your outcome, despite of if you have the energy or not to complete it. So yes, the answer is there is some literature to say that some people might have some innate willpower than others, but I wouldn't have any clear definition based on literature. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and there's a couple more I wanted just to kind of that goes along with that. And it says, what do you call someone that can create a new habit but later revert back to the old habits?
I wouldn't know exactly the exact term for reverting back to a habit, but for most studies would just be like someone who didn't successfully sustain the habit or reverted back to their previous habit. So no, there is no one name that I know of, but yeah, just the one who reverted back to their old habits or failed to adopt a new one.
Great. And there's a few more, but I think I might add those at the end that kind of go along.
Sounds good. Yeah, just you can bring them out to the end and let me know. But yeah, as I was mentioning before, if we were to actually engage in the big picture thinking that, let's say, a friend recommended, we would assess what we currently know is important for us. And let's say that we came up with this 4 big categories for our dietary change. We know that these are important for us, and we evaluate them just like subjectively. Put some random numbers. We know that 100% is what we is going to add up to, but then we really just take an objective look at it, and we know that our energy and satiety from this new diet for some reason is good, but we really can't foresee keep going with this. We don't really have support from our peers, which additionally makes like the ease of this being of the social ease of this being harder, apart from the fact that, you know, maybe the restaurants don't really have the availability for you to accommodate your new diet. So now you're engaging with this bigger picture, and then you talk to your peers so that they will support you with maybe some slight modifications to your diet. Now you want to, let's say, include cheese where before you didn't, and now you can have the option of like cheese in your pizza, and et cetera, et cetera. Just think of like a new inclusion that you were able to make so that you can now more easily incorporate this habit, which leads literally to a more balanced approach. Now, it will look a little bit more like this, which ideally will lead to a better satisfaction with your new habit, and ideally will help you to sustain it long term. So now, after giving some reference for a few things, I want to jump into the practical application of habits into nutrition. So here it is actually interesting to go back to the original definition of diet, because it was framed to initially as a way of life. So dieta, which is the Latin for diet, literally means a way of life. But unfortunately, most people implicitly understand this to be an on and off thing, and they associate it with terms like restriction, less ability to consume foods that I like, et cetera, et cetera. And ultimately, it has been shown in the literature to lead to what I want to just call colloquially the what the hell effect. So here we look at the picture. It really encapsulates really well what happens with us would say, just imagine this is you and a pizza, but I'm just gonna go with the dog for now. So you're the dog or the person with the pizza, and you're just saying, oh, it's good to be home and relaxing. Finally, I was so tired, and but you know that the owner is gonna come back and engage with you know, this pillow. They will just sit on the pillow, but really like to chew.
Now that you are not a
and yeah, so you fall asleep, you don't really think about it, you think it's gonna be fine, but whoops, you eat a slice of the pizza, or as the dog did, bites the pillow, and then they just go, what the hell? Are you already like ate a piece of it, might as well just consume the whole thing, and they blow it. But obviously you don't think I have to think about this hard to know that this, at the end of the day, is not necessary. You did not have to, for example, consume the whole pizza, or you didn't have to eat the entire pillow. If you would have eaten one bite, it would have been still better. But again, it's not the fact that we think rationally about this. We're literally just going with our gut instincts about what we think is going to work, which is like to hold on, to really restrain from our behavior. But ultimately, it sort of creates this friction that builds and builds and builds and builds, and ultimately you just feel like you can't resist it, and you just binge or whatever it is that ends up happening with your undesired behavior. So based on this, I think the old adage really came about, which has many people saying like, it's not a diet, it's a lifestyle, which actually refers to systems thinking. A good way to think about this to me was said by Sohee Lee. It says that if you can't see yourself sticking to your diet 1 year from now, you need to rethink your strategy. If you don't like the way you eat, you won't stick it for long, and it'll only be a matter of time before you jump ship and end up regaining, at least in this, she was talking about weight, but really it comes about with any one change that we want to have regarding diet. It's like if you want to, you know, just have more freedom in your diet and you want it to be more flexible, and that's your goal, you're just gonna end up a baseline. So it is better to think of it in terms of a system, and think of it in terms of a system. Really, it is to engage with 4 different strategies that have been, again, repeatedly shown in the literature to help with sustainability. The first thing is sustainability as an item in and of itself, because to think about this helps you to frame what you're going to put in your diet, what you're going to avoid, etc. Because there is no diet like the one that you're going to end up adhering long term to. Because people, again, like if you are a clinician, if you are someone working in the trenches, or even if you're just someone trying to engage in a new diet, you're trying to think of the superiority of the diet in itself, like it's better for metabolic health, for X, Y, and Z. But the real question is, can you adhere to the diet long term? If not, just rethink your strategy. And the second one actually addresses the question of willpower, or the issue of willpower, because many people think that they have to be motivated enough in order to engage with their habit. But again, if you think systems, if you just think of the things that help you to make the right decisions, even when you don't want to, you would think of your environment. You would think of I get home and what's there, what's on the counter, what's right there available when I come home from work, either tired or with enough energy. So just make it easy to engage in the right behaviors. Put the things that you want to consume visible, and the things that you don't want to consume invisible. So don't bring them home, or maybe just put them in a in a cabinet. Moderate, just be abstinent if you want. Just you gauge your own level of restriction, I guess you have to incorporate, but just be accountable for how your environment is helping to shape your behaviors. The third strategy is a level of engaging in some level of cognitive restraint, which is to say that you want to have some accountability. You want to have a buddy to help you to engage in your new habit. So that's actually why many times any type of system helps with sustainability long term than the diets, I guess, that don't have a system for accountability. So if you have like a points in your diet, like I think it's I actually don't remember the name of it right now, but yeah, there are many systems that just involve some restraint. Like you have points that you count, you have a partner, you have a coach, you have a dietitian, you have someone who you are accountable to. And this is one of the main things to think about. So again, it's not the name of the diet that will determine the success of it, but mostly like, is the accountability that I am going to engage in sustainable for me long term? Am I willing to do this? But make sure that you have something there. To not just be like, I hope that now that I'm engaging in this, it will just happen by itself. Have something to keep you accountable. And the last piece to put together here is going to be to not rush into the process, to really go slow into it, because one of the main things that comes out in the literature is the speed at which people engage in. It is often referred to as just like unsustainable weight loss, because people really try to go into what many people know as a crash diet, and they do lose a lot of weight. So again, in the problem in America, for example, it's not really that we have a weight loss problem because people can't lose weight. People lose weight. Now I'm just going with the weight loss example here, but yeah, we don't really have a problem with weight loss because people do lose the weight. It's just that they can't keep it up. So a strategy here would be to incorporate things slowly. It gives you time to think about it. It gives you time to reevaluate if something is not going well. So again, engaging in sustainable behavior, choosing the right food environment, engaging in some sort of cognitive restraint or accountability system, and taking it slow in order for it to, I guess, go well. And now I want to shift gears into exercise. And I want to make a note on the fact that actually most of the things that I'm going to be talking about carry over to the next segment. But the literature, for some reason, finds this particular items that I'm going to be talking about particularly successful. But in general, each one of them, you will notice, are effective in each one of the areas. So sustainability works for each one of the habits that you want to engage in. Either as exercise, nutrition, meditation, water, anything. It doesn't matter. They should matter because they are inevitably part of the things that are going to determine your success. But here I want to just, again, jump into exercise and re-emphasize to not yo-yo, to just not have one program in which you engage in and then jump before you even have time to evaluate into another. Also regarding exercise, to not think that you can just exercise your diet away. So not to think that you can just eat all the pizzas possible, but if you just exercise quite enough, you will be able to outweigh the negative effects of your diet. And lastly, again, to reemphasize that you need to find something you can adhere to. And nothing makes the point better than the study looking at the show The Biggest Loser. So people that went to The Biggest Loser, as we know, they engaged in a really strict nutritional and exercise regimen. And true, as I mentioned before, they did lose weight. So if we look here in this graph, here we have their body weight change. And by the end of the 30 weeks, I believe was The Biggest Loser, most people ended up on either a slight weight loss or actually like a significant weight loss or a huge weight loss. But looking at their sustainability, upon 6 years of their diet and their exercise, like coming back to baseline because they were just simply unsustainable, weight came back up, just because of the physiological way that things go. Fat-free mass, like, lean mass went up a little bit, but notably their fat mass went up like crazy. So just as compared to their baseline. So they chose as their goal that they wanted to lose weight. And as I mentioned before, came right back to baseline. It's not the point. So let's just not do this. But
Jonathan?
Yeah.
Jonathan, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
What do you do when you have incorporated good changes, consistent exercise, nutrition, food, tracking, but weight does not change? How does one stay motivated? I try to consider other rewards such as how I feel, but it is difficult to stay motivated, sometimes easy to get what the hell attitude. This person's in their 50s and weight loss is so much slower than it used to be. Any suggestions?
Right. Yeah, so one of the main things to consider here is the fact that, as this person mentioned, weight loss shouldn't be the sole goal of engaging in diet. Diet really provides a number of benefits, and weight loss just happens to be one of them. But if for some reason the person does decide to, lose some weight and they are not getting their goal, obviously here I would just refer to just go and seek the help of a professional. One of the main things that happens regarding weight loss as a goal and people not seeing the results is not really being in a caloric deficit. So people think that because they're engaging in their behavior and they're successfully repeating it, they think that now weight loss should just be a thing that comes with. But many times you are getting many, many benefits, but weight loss doesn't happen to be one of them. So there, the specific part of the equation that might go not be going as intended might be the caloric deficit end of itself. So at that point, if you really don't know what to do to troubleshoot properly, I would just seek the help of a professional to do it appropriately, to maybe just slightly decrease calories in a way that is sustainable. And again, I mentioned the help of a dietitian just because many times we reduce calories in a non-sustainable way. We reduce just portions, which is the most common way of doing it. But just an example, one of the things that a professional would suggest would be to just eat foods that provide the same amount of satiety, but at the end of the day, you don't really feel the effect of the calorie reduction. So yeah, that's just one strategy to engage in. I would suggest regarding weight loss. If you're really having difficulty with it, just talk to a professional. But yeah, that would be I would think one way to think about it, to really think about all the benefits that diet is providing, and with regards to weight loss, to think of that part of the equation. Okay, so that being said, I want to jump into what we should actually do regarding exercise that would make the habit change most effective. But first, I really just want to talk about the way in which many people just set the goals for exercise. And this really was me when I was younger, honestly. I would go to New Year's. I was definitely a New Year's person when I was younger. And I would say, okay, now I'm going to do it. This is the pole vault approach, meaning I'm going to go as high as possible. I'm going to reach for the sky 5 days a week, cardio, yoga, everything under the sun. I'm going to do it at all. And I got all the injuries you can think of. I fell on my face first so many times. It was crazy. And it took me just a long time to then come to this approach. This is just basically all right, let me just realistically start with 2 to 3 days a week. I think is a good starting point. And this just goes to the first point. It talks about lowering the threshold, because engaging with something that you can successfully accomplish in of itself is intrinsically pleasurable. So you just lower the threshold of what you think you can do so that you for sure can hit it. You will then be able to accomplish it more easily, and then you feel motivated to keep going. And Tessa, if you could do me a favor, I think there is some drawing here. If you could just restrict the ability to draw, that'd be great.
Okay.
But yeah, so here, one way to think about it is using SMART goals. I believe this stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-bound. You can definitely look this up, but it's just one way to think about how to set up your goals so that you're properly lowering the threshold. Again, if you make it specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-bound, you will say that, again, going for 5 days of everything you can think of under the sun is just not realistic. You really are not setting a proper goal. You're like, hope it happens at some point during this year. Attainable, not really. Measurable, hopefully in one way or another you're writing it down. Probably not if you haven't really like thought about this through. And specific, maybe, maybe not. Again, it's just one way to think about it, but just lowering the threshold is essential at the beginning so that you can see yourself really getting there. Second, it would be to really emphasize the need for community support in order for you to accomplish your goal. We are intricately connected. Oh my God. Here we know that we are going to have to rely on people. Like we have our family. If we don't have our family, we have our friends. If we don't have our friends, we have our colleagues. We have multiple people that we rely upon to do multiple things. And getting involved in exercise is not, it doesn't like fall outside of this realm. So finding a workout buddy, finding a coach, finding an app, finding something again that, as I mentioned before, holds you accountable and provides that little push that you need in order to keep going the next day helps. So knowing, for example, for me, that my friend was waiting for me, my friend Richie and I would go, and there was this a place where we would go run in the morning. He was waiting for me. So I knew that if I didn't go, I was gonna let him down. So I would, even if it was 5 in the morning, I would just get up and go. Not that you have to get up at 5 in the morning, but it just makes the point for you are setting yourself up for success if you do it this way. And lastly, it's important to remark that reducing friction between the start of your habit and the actual engagement in the habit is very important. So say that you're trying to, start this running habit, but you really can't get to it. So think of the things that you need to do in order for you to start. You know that you need to have your clothes on because you're probably not going to go in your work clothes. So say that you go to sleep and you want to go and now you have this goal that is specific, is measurable, is all this stuff. And the time-bound and measurable part involves you doing it in the morning for 30 minutes, meaning that you now want to go to bed with your clothes on. Now it's easier to start because you don't have to really put your clothes on, they're on. Or for example, just put your shoes right by your bed. Now you're modifying your environment and now you have a cue as soon as you wake up to remember that you have to go run. So this just makes the point, just the easier you make it for you to start your habit, the easier it is for you to repeat it and for you to specifically like start it, which is again what many people say it's one of the main limitations, just starting the actual habit. Once they get going, they can keep going, but starting it is one of the main problems. And now I'm going to change gears to the last topic in this presentation, which is meditation. I just want to make the note here, I am not a meditation teacher. I know that that's not like necessarily a specific credential that I know of as of now, but people that have engaged in meditation for a long time really are teachers with 30, 40 years of practice, sometimes less, sometimes more, but they have engaged with this practice for a long, long time. Here, I am just one who has engaged with this habit successfully. I have done it for 4 years now. I have gone to several meditation retreats. So I can speak from a first-person perspective of what it is like to go through all the limitations, all the barriers that keep you from meditating and to adopt it successfully. So just to start off, I want to talk about like what people talk about when they talk about engaging in the project of meditating. This person here is my favorite meditation teacher, and this is his teacher. And when he was starting, he was really reluctant to start, and he was really just like, I don't know what this is about. It just seems like has a lot of religious background to it, and I'm not into that. But his teacher just said, okay, you just seem like you're in distress, and you seem like you don't understand your mind, but you want to. So if you just want to understand your mind, sit down and observe it. And as a matter of fact, apparently this gained traction. He helped, Joseph Goldstein helped to bring this practice to the West. And as you can see down here, many apps have also taken the task to popularize this practice, which we now know has many, many, many benefits. So just briefly talking about the benefits, or I want to go into the opposite side, like talking about what it is that this practice is helping you to accomplish, what problem is getting solved here. One of the main things that gets talked about is that we think continuously, without knowing that we are thinking. You might have heard someone say that someone that meditates say that. But specifically in the literature, actually there's a psychologist in the 80s, Thomas Vorkovec, talked about this process of behavior change and how one of the cues can actually be a negative emotion, and how many of the mental habits that we engage in are actually a routine. So I'm gonna give an example here. For example, we have this cue. It's a pandemic, so we have news coming, like all kind of bad news coming from any source that we want to get, like the internet, our phones, the computer, it doesn't matter. And they might evoke many like unpleasant memories about, the past, the future. And you might be engaging in this process repeatedly, thinking about the past, thinking about the future, thinking about the past, thinking about the future. And now you don't really notice it, but you are feeling all those negative emotions, which are cueing a routine, which is to engage in anxiety and worry and anger. And at the end of the day, we many times end up doing something about it. So we either distract ourselves, we grab our phones, we go talk to someone, we just look away, we distract ourselves, we try to regain control, we try to do something about it, and at the end of the day, we end up just reinforcing this cycle. But I want to talk about specifically what is introduced here upon engaging in meditation. So once we engage in the process of learning how to meditate, which is surprisingly easy to start, we don't know exactly why this happens. We don't know precisely what mechanism gets activated, but the first person perspective, the feeling of having this tool available feels like a bell that gets rung whenever we engage in this, when we notice these negative emotions that are associated with these cues, with that come with the news, cueing, anxiety or worry, or this past and future planning presents, instead of us going immediately into a routine of anxiety or worry. For some reason, again, we don't know the exact mechanisms, this bell gets rung. And now we don't really engage in this. This gets, interestingly, replaced. So from what would have been a negative emotion and then immediately worry, what we feel here is relief. And what we feel here, the reward, many times is either concentration or relief in and of itself, being the reward. So again, the process in of itself, we don't completely understand it, but what we do feel as a first person perspective is that we now have a bell that now it's installed and now we have it, and we really can't make it go. We can obviously ignore that we have the bell, but the bell is there.
Jonathan,
Yes.
there's a question out there. Are there any studies about fibromyalgia or chronic disease or illness and engagement in diet and exercise?
Yes, there are, but the problem is that I don't know of any high quality, like systematic reviews, meaning like high big picture studies, making any conclusive evidence about pain being completely mitigated by any given supplement or dietary strategy. But there are a number of bioactive compounds that have been talked about regarding diet that can help to mitigate general pain, and they include fibromyalgia. So some of them have been, from what I understand, curcumin. So specific doses of curcumin, I believe is how it's pronounced, and other adaptogens have been looked at. But no, there is no solid evidence to say that they will completely eliminate your pain, but there is some suggestive evidence to say that they might help to modulate pain.
And then I have another one. How do you initiate and maintain a behavior change when your family members are engaging in opposite behaviors? For example, you're trying to eat more fruits and vegetables while your spouse eat tons of junk food.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about including a slide regarding like inclusion of habits and the family environment, because yes, as this person mentioned, it really is hard to engage in a behavior whenever like people are opposing it. But here, the main thing that I cannot emphasize enough is to communicate with whoever it is that that is going to be seeing you engage in this habit, or is going to have to support you with the sustainability of this habit. because again, we are interconnected. We have to get people that matter to us to be on our same page. So yes, the idea for you to engage in your habit is to talk with people that matter most to you, that are going to help you to be engaged in this habit, and make sure that they agree and that they see this plan be something that that you all can do as a group. They don't have, for example, you're a vegan or vegetarian or engage in some other type of diet, your spouse, your children, they don't have to do it, but they have to support you, and they have to be okay with the fact that you're going to continually be engaged in this.
And then you had referenced BELL before, and could you review what you meant or you mean by that?
Yeah, I'm just gonna go back really quick with this slide. Yeah, by the introduction of a BELL, I meant to say that the process of meditating makes this feelings associated with the, sorry, I'm just going, yeah. What I meant to say was that the process of meditating makes the feelings associated with the contemplation of this horrible news, or with the engagement in this past or future kind of planning, upon meditating, it for some reason becomes more noticeable. It's as if instead of someone whispering in the back, someone was yelling at you, like you are feeling bad. Just notice it. Not like necessarily engage with it, but just notice it. That's what gets taught upon meditating. But the BELL just refers to the increasing noticeable feeling of the sensations coming on. So hopefully that answers the question. Okay, so I wanted to now talk about some of the promising ways in which now we have been able to look at mindfulness. Because nowadays, many clinicians, many psychiatrists specifically, have looked at behavior change and mindfulness specifically to mitigate problems with disordered eating. I wanted to actually say disordered eating there, not disorders, but yeah, disordered eating, substance abuse, including nicotine addiction. Just to give an example here, a recent program was able to see effects of 5 times the effectiveness of the gold standard treatment, which is commonly in cognitive behavioral therapy for nicotine remission. And a mindfulness-based approach was 5 times as effective. And also pain regulation. So yeah, this includes just chronic pain, chronic back pain. I believe there have been studies in fibromyalgia, but don't quote me on that. But yeah, there has been a substantial amount of literature mounting in support of mindfulness helping with pain regulation, because it doesn't necessarily make the pain go away. It just helps with the process of noticing that you're engaging in mental pain and not just physical pain. And interestingly, that is something that, at least from the first person perspective, has been anecdotally reported to be able to be decoupled. So people can engage in pain, in physical pain, and not necessarily just re-engage with the thought of, oh my God, that hurts so much, by simply and clearly feeling the pain in and of itself. And I can definitely attest to this. When I was in my meditation retreats, there are moments in which you've been sitting for 8 hours and it just hurts. You have to just stand up. But for some reason, you don't feel the extensive pain, like, oh my God, this has hurt for several hours. So yeah, the literature is just mounting and mounting for the benefits of mindfulness meditation. But regarding how to apply this specifically, as I mentioned before, everything that I've said before carries over to this, the importance of each one of the things. But now there are some little barriers that you might encounter in trying to engage with mindfulness meditation that you might not engage in, that you might not see in exercise and nutrition. So although you might want to start slow, I just want to start here. You might want to start slow, just like you would do with nutrition and exercise change. You do want to set a time of, for example, like 5 to 10 minutes, if that seems doable, to start off, because this mindfulness have really suffered from unrealistic timelines. People just trying to meditate for, 30, 40 minutes, and they have no idea how to engage in pain. And unfortunately, if you are someone that has had past trauma or something of the sort, you might have feelings that you don't know necessarily how to deal with. and being engaged with them for like really prolonged periods of time can be distressing and really traumatizing. So again, starting slow here is even more important to emphasize. And again, progress here is going to be non-linear. It's going to be the feeling of us going down, up, down, because now we can see that we're thinking more and more and more. It's going to be felt more, so it feels like we're going down, but then you are going to notice that you can deal with it better. So now the feeling goes up in terms of your acquisition of the skill. Here, the choosing the right practice is really important. So if either you want to engage in concentration because you feel like you lack that, open awareness, training your compassion muscles, et cetera, is really important. And lastly, engaging with an app here is going to be very useful. Having a guiding teacher can be very, very helpful.
Jonathan, somebody asked, what is compassion training?
Yeah, this is really not something that I knew either what it was when I first engaged in it, but it's also called metta or loving kindness training. But it refers to the process of repeating phrases that you can easily engage with. So if you, or not even repeating phrases, as long as you can engage with the feeling of, for example, love and friendliness and amicability and all this good feelings of well-wishing, and you can repeat it towards a friend, yourself, a neutral person, and something who you have complications with, that is training in compassion. That is like essentially what people in the meditation world call training in compassion. You're actually literally trying to make that the default. That when you think about someone else, you're thinking of them in a well-wishing, like in good terms, essentially, even with difficult people. And here I just wanted to give some conclusions and reiterate the importance of each one of the factors that are key for each one of the topics that we touch on. So here for nutrition, again, we talked about sustainability being a key factor for you to engage in your behavior long-term. Food environment being important so that the right thing to do is the default thing to do. To hold yourself accountable in one way or another, to have a friend, to have a assistant, to have a nap, to have one way or another to do it, and to engage in it in a way that you can reevaluate, so do it slowly. Exercise, make sure to incorporate some system that helps you to understand your goals realistically. So again, I mentioned lowering the threshold, but setting your goals in a like specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound way, it makes your goal bound to succeed. Having support from your peers, again, in all this area, this applies to all the areas, but here, you know, it is going to be essential for you to have the approval of your friends and the people that are in your life that that want you to succeed, to have your support. And lastly, we want to reduce the friction between you starting your habit and you engaging in, like starting and continuing your habit. And lastly, meditating. As I mentioned before, it's important for each one of these, but starting slow, again, here is going to be very, very important. Knowing that, because now things are going to come up in your head in a more pronounced way, and it's important to know that progress is not going to be nonlinear. You're going to start meditating, you're going to feel like you're thinking nonstop, but that's good because now you know that you're thinking. Now the progress or the process itself is not going subconsciously. It is important to choose the right practice, to know what your main cognitive toolkit is lacking the most. So if you lack concentration, you're getting constantly distracted, you might want to engage in that. If you find yourself just talking repeatedly, like in bad terms about someone else, you want to engage in compassion training or simply some other kind of training, because they're just saying I'm meditating. It's like saying I'm engaging in sports. There are just too many, and each one of them has a different benefit. And last thing is to find a teacher, to find an app, because this is just really going to maximize your ability to know what the terrain is going to look like, to know how you can overcome a barrier. This person or this app that you're going to have is now going to be is going to really help you to succeed in your habit.
Jonathan, do
Yes.
the long-term results of meditation depend on the amount of time per day?
Yeah, that is something that is being looked at increasingly. And yes, there seems to be like a threshold, but that threshold hasn't been clearly established, because we have seen in studies that as low as 10 to 20 minutes can be very successful for the change in even neural processes that can be visible at the neural level to be detectable. So there are significant changes that can happen with 5 to 10 minutes, but there seems to be a dose dependence. So people that have, for example, engaged with 30 to 40 minutes per day and now can successfully do it and do it more frequently do seem to draw more benefit from it. But for the purpose of like first just engaging with it, I want to remark that it's important to start with an amount of time that you know you can commit to, so that you can later, if you want to and you feel like you can, then engage in those 30, 40 minutes if you really want to get to that. And here is something that, again, it's provided in the handout, but it's just a way for you to think of how to put this all into practice. Like you have your goal, you want to incorporate, you choose one. This is very specific, very realistic. You want to eat more veggies, you want to walk, meditate. And again, this is, I'm going to give credit to my girlfriend. She made this and she helped me to think about this. But yeah, jumping into accountability, then you choose one thing to be accountable, one or two things. You go into the slow incorporation of it. You're engaging with it 1-2 times a week. And then lastly, you are reevaluating and then reiterating the process again and again to make it more refined and to make it more doable. And just some resources here just to make this talk as practical as possible. We have a book and an app for each one of the topics that I talked on, for nutrition, exercise, and meditation. And I wanted to put out there 2 resources for behavior change in general. This is a topic that is covered broadly in the literature and in books and lay books. And these are 2 resources I really encourage you to look. And I just want to put a plug here. We have a next week, Ask the Experts, the health disparities and COVID-19 is going to be talked about in the Zoom webinar next Thursday, July 16th from 12 to 1. So I encourage everyone to attend. This topic is obviously hard pressing on every one of us. So yeah. And definitely want to encourage everyone to attend next week's talk, which is going to be on genetics, nutrition, and the brain. It's going to be by Mikhail Key. And yeah, now I'm ready to take any questions if we have some time. I know we took some questions in the meanwhile, but
Yeah, and I just want to say, we really do appreciate your feedback. It is valuable to us, and we would love to hear from you about the topic, what topics you'd like to learn more about. I even got the person in the chat that they would like to hear this one with a little bit longer time. So I'll draw your attention to the online survey and we put in the chat box, but we will take a little bit more time for those of you who want to stay on just to ask a few more questions. Jonathan, there was one earlier, and I know you kind of alluded to it, but does motivation and willpower work together, or are they different concepts?
Yeah, so they often get talked about interchangeably in the literature, and sometimes they don't. But motivation many times involves the incorporation of systems so that the push that you feel to engage in your habit is strong. So if you consider what is pushing you behind, like if you were to think of you starting your habit and things pushing you from behind for you to start that habit, one of the things to think of is willpower pushing you to be more motivated. So in the literature, that is one of the ways that it gets talked about differentially, if that makes sense.
Yes, and then we had another one. Was there a beginner book that you would recommend for starting meditation?
Yeah.
And what resources to introduce to children? Do you have anything to recommend for that?
Yeah. So this book right here is the one that I would honestly recommend to most people. It's to start off at the very least. So if you are just thinking about engaging in this habit and you don't really know where to start, you don't really know what this is about, this is a really, really good book to read or to listen to, 10% Happier by Dan Harris. And then this app, this app, I believe, has meditations for children, and so does this app right here. This book is an app as well, but this app, Waking Up, has meditations for children, I believe as low as, I think, 4 to 6 years old. So impressively, this has been incorporated even in schools with very, very early ages. And I recommend these 2 apps primarily for, again, starting off meditation, 10% Happier, and for children, both are very useful. The 10% Happier app and Waking Up.
Was there any other questions that somebody had for Jonathan? So how do you sustain stopping a bad habit? I find it easier to do things you're supposed to as opposed to stopping negative habits.
Yeah, I would recommend reading this book for that specifically, because if everyone noticed here, I talk mostly about the initiation of a habit, but if you would want to stop a bad habit, what I would suggest and what this book that I'm recommending suggests is to reverse the process. So if you are trying to make something, for example, have less friction for you to be able to engage in it, just try to revert the process and increase the friction. So now what was, for example, easily at reach at your countertop, now it's not even at home, you didn't buy it, or it's in a cabinet and locked away, you barely remember where it is. Or for example, if you want to make something like just along with food environment, like if something was visible, now make it invisible, along with the example of reducing friction. But yeah, to go into more detail, I would definitely suggest reverting the process of making things more easy. And I would refer to this book of Atomic Habits, in which the process of stopping bad habits gets talked about a lot too.
Great.
Any other questions? Sorry.
Somebody would like you to show the slide created by your girlfriend again.
Got it. Yep, props to her. This is going to be in the handout as well, but this slide is really good because it really just outlines the engagement in a habit and how you go through it in each step. It's a little bit different from the SMART goals approach, but it still very much encapsulates what the SMART goals tries to apply in even less steps, in my opinion. So even probably more easily to visualize.
Jonathan, an individual asked if there was a way to contact you direct if they had additional questions.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind anyone to shoot me an email, to be completely honest. So would it be okay if I just put my email in the
Chat box?
No?
Yes.
Yeah, everyone feel free to contact me if you have any specific questions. Again, this word applied to different topics, but yeah, there are different topics that have been looked at in the literature and of themselves, and there are other specific approaches that have been talked about for those specific habits. So if you have questions about this or other habits, just feel free to contact me.
Great.
Thank you for tuning into CU Wise TV. We hope you enjoyed the show. This video can be accessed anytime on youtube.com. In the YouTube search bar, type in UPTV6 and look for their microphone logo. We hope you will join us again next week for more local, engaging content designed specifically for Champaign County older adults.